Hey, welcome back, class. This is PEP 406, Curriculum Design in Physical Education, and I'm Dr. Chad Kish. I'll be taking you through the journey here on Chapter 4, Building the Curriculum. We've already met in class and had one lecture, and we are going to move on to our video lecture. Brief review from last time. We talked about the discussion of unpacking our standards, looking at GLEs and Show Me standards. We started the process of understanding how to put it all together and build a curriculum. We talked about the instructional alignment triad and its importance in building an effective aligned curriculum. We talked about a variety of curricular considerations, and we started introducing standards. So let me get to today's information. Today's information, we're going to start off and talk about time considerations. How do you figure out how much time you have in the class to get things you want to do? So when you want to plan your curriculum, how much time do you have? Do you meet 3 days a week? Do you meet every day? Is it a semester class? Is it once a week? Is it every third day on a rotation with other specialty classes? So we'll give you a formula to figure out some time you might have on activity. We will look at the definitions of scope and sequence. You probably know those before, but we'll dig a little deeper into those, what scope and sequence of a curriculum is. We'll talk about technology and its uses and the things you have to consider. So considerations for technology in the physical education curriculum and classroom. We'll talk about some implications for instruction. We will dig deeper, although we've talked about this some, we'll dig a little bit deeper into the backward design process. And then we will pull it all together with a chapter summary and give you your cumulative, summative assignment for this chapter. So let's get going. This is video number 1, but lecture number 2 for chapter 4, module 4, building the curriculum. So when we consider time and scheduling in the classroom, you have to think, how many days are we going to meet per week? What is the length of the class? And then what is the number of weeks in your school year? All right? Think of your length of each class session as actually the time for instruction. So if you have 50 minutes and you give them 5 minutes on each end for dressing out, that really only leaves you 40 minutes of class time, whether that's at the middle school or high school level. So here's your basic formula to determine time in PE. You take your number of class sessions per week. Is that 1? Is it alternating? So you might have to do some division if you meet every third day. Is it 2 days? Is it 2.5 days? You meet every other day and it just continues to rotate? Or is it 5 days per week for the semester? Take your length of class time, put that next, and then put the number of weeks in a school year. And if your class only meets for a semester, you'll do the number of weeks in a semester here. So you'll multiply the green by the blue by the red, and that'll estimate your instructional time for either the semester or the year, based on how if you go by a semester or a year here. The things we kind of must remember is we're going to lose time due to holidays. Schools generally have assemblies, possibly every quarter or every semester. There's going to be drill days. There's going to be some snow days or weather days or possibly online days. So we got to remember all those things, plus the days that we may lose our facility and not be prepared, such as picture day, or it might rain outside, so we have to move inside and alter our what we're going to do. So we must remember there's going to be some other things here that complicate our formula. So you might want to even take about a week and a half off of this formula when you get done. So that is how to estimate time. Once you figure out your time, then you can start determining where your curriculum is going to go from there. How much time do you have to divide out by your activities? So consider your time for scheduling in PE based on your specific situation. Next, let's go into a few definitions here. It's critical to understand the scope, the sequence, and what a multi-activity program is when you're building curriculum. So if we remember, the scope is broad. It's the content that is being taught, it's the specific focus, and the selected or the activities you select within the content. So if you think of scope, that is everything you're going to do throughout a school year. All right. So it's broad. It's the breadth of it. It's if we're going to do team sports, individual activities, if we're going to do cooperative activities, we're going to do outdoor education, we're going to do lifetime sports, we're going to do health and fitness. You might think of it as starting off developing your scope is going to be what are going to be my unit or chapter titles, and then even under that is going to be your specific lesson. So the scope is everything the curriculum might cover in a semester or year. The sequence is our next important word we need to define. That is just like sequence would be. It's not tricky. It's the order or progression in which learning activities are presented. So you might want to remember when you're sequencing out your curriculum, you might want to start with some basic movement activities and then move to more complex activities like you would do in an elementary curriculum. But even in the high school curriculum, keep that in mind. Start out with things that are simpler movements, have less rules, less strategies, and then build on them. You might use the teaching games for understanding model to do net games and start out with possibly badminton and move to tennis and pickleball and volleyball, which are all common net games. But you might not want to do those all together because students that don't enjoy participating in that activity you might lose them for a whole month. So it's good to stagger activities at the middle school and high school level between some health and fitness, some individual or dual or lifetime sports, recreational sports, into a team sport, and then come back and start over. So if you stagger activities and make sure your sequence engages all your students so you don't lose somebody for a long period of time, that's another great way to do it. When you're thinking of your scope and sequence and even time on PE, if you're at high school level, are you going to do fitness days? If you meet 5 days a week, are you going to do activity Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and fitness Tuesday and Thursday? Depends on how you design your curriculum. Last, another important definition is multi-activity program. That is a program characterized by a wide variety of activities. So this means we're going to do a lot of different things. You might change units every week to 2 weeks in a multi-activity program. You're going to just give students the basic information, teach them a few of the skills, give them an opportunity to participate, and then before students get bored, you're going to move on to another skill or activity. That might be a good way to handle some classroom management issues, to give students a broad scope of understanding of different activities. It gives students more options because the units are short. But remember, this really limits your instructional time, time for practice, time for students to actually learn and be proficient in skills. So when you do this, you're going to have to systematically connect your skills from one lesson to another so the students really have time to improve. All right? So hopefully you understand those 3 important definitions when we're developing a curriculum. Next, let's talk a little bit about curricular considerations. All right? So in curricular considerations, let's start out by talking about the scope and sequence. It's when and where should each of the standards actually be emphasized. So when you're building a curriculum, you'll spread your activities out. Like I said, you might stagger it with a health and fitness, long-term wellness related unit or chapter, and then follow it up with an individual dual activity recreational sports, and then a more of a traditional team sports, and then start over. Or you might put a wild card in there like an international sport or a cooperative games day or a challenge day. But when and where then are the standards going to be emphasized? After you kind of get your activities, how do you tie those back to the standards? All right. Remember, you might have an overarching standard for a lesson or unit, but you might, in one unit, teach all 5 of the standards within a week. You might teach 2 to 3 standards within a day, but it's important to connect those standards. How can different standards be emphasized in different places of the program? Well, you might think of NASB standard number 2 if you're in a team sports unit and talk about strategy and tactics, but you might also think of NASB standard number 4 working with teamwork, cooperation, sportsmanship, and ethics. So those 2 can be emphasized in the same exact place in the same lesson, but remember, you have to be intentional about teaching them, so you're going to have to touch on both of those subjects with your teaching. You can't just expect it to naturally happen. So yes, standards can overlap in instruction, and they normally do. You might have a focus standard for the day. If we're teaching, say, the sport of soccer, we might think of standard number one, we're working on dribbling skills, all right? And then we build up to standard number two, where we're going to work on passing skills. Well, if I'm sorry, it'll still be standard number one, but if we work on our passing skills, but when we're working on passing skills, you have to then think of, is there strategies and tactics involved? Once we add a defender, that brings in standard number two. Plus, we have to have standard number four, our cooperation and teamwork and communication. So we might have a main standard and then two other substandards that build in as we go through the sequence of our activity. Can we help each student find an activity they enjoy and will continue? This goes on NASB standard number 5. The one thing we do as PE teachers, we really focus in a lot on teaching and instruction and teaching the movement patterns and the games and understanding of the rules. And we forget to take a moment to reflect and ask people why they liked it, why they didn't like it. Reflect on it. Would you want to do this? Would you like to consider doing it? If you're in an elementary, can I help you get with the Parks and Recreation team? All right. So take some time to let students journal or answer questions in an interview type technique of why they enjoy it. Once they say it out loud and they write it down, that might help them persist or continue in the activity. So make sure we have a big enough scope that every student can find something that they'll continue to do to help them stay active across the lifespan. So in the last 20 years, technology has started creeping into physical education. There's always been a chance that it's been there, but there's a lot more things that technology comes into effect. If you think of 20 years ago, a varsity basketball team may practice, may go over the other team's scouting report, but now even at the high school level, you're going to watch video on opponents. You're going to use technology for your own games to watch video of your own games and your own performance. The stats, you no longer have to put them in a grid and add them up every game. You're going to enter them into a program. So technology has integrated itself into physical education and athletics. But we need to consider a couple things, especially in the last couple of years. Technology is very critical to the success of education, and you're going to have to learn how to use technology if you're teaching in a remote or online environment, which may happen immediately, right? So how does technology impact your physical education and or health and wellness fitness type program? All right, ask yourself that. There are a lot of different ways that technology can impact the program. You may have to immediately use a technological system and go online or remote. You may actually be able to use your iPads or Chromebooks and allow students to videotape their partner, or I'll take your Chromebook and videotape you doing the activity, and then you can watch a video clip. That's some immediate feedback and a chance to do self-observation that we didn't have in the past. But now as schools are moving to a one-to-one atmosphere, technology is available for us. We can send video clips out to students and have them watch it before they ever get into class for the activity. That could be a homework type assignment that we really didn't have as much access to in the past. So what technology do we have access to? You're just going to have to see what your school has. Is it a one-to-one school where every kid already has a laptop or a device? Is it a school district where it's a high-end suburban school district where every kid has their own or might have their own phone, right? Phones could be a distraction, but almost every phone has a camera, a video camera on it. You could learn to use those in your class too and not just think they're a distraction. Do you have access to your own video system? Right? Can you use a PowerPoint? Can you even show videos in your classroom? Do you have a projector? And then you can even think of things as technology, as your scoreboard, as your timing systems, as a audio-visual presentation. Do you have some music you can do things to? So what technology do you specifically have access to? And it's critical to consider this as you're building the curriculum. All right? Next thing, do you as a teacher have technological literacy? Do you know how to use all the different devices? If not, can you set yourself up for training to be able to go and use them? Did you come into a school that has a box in the back that has pedometers or heart rate monitors? Do you know how to use the heart rate monitors, to download the information, to use the software, to even integrate them into different activities? right? So it's important to have technological literacy and learn how to use the different technology that you have access to. Make sure you set yourself up with some professional development and training and stay current and try to stay on the cutting edge because this stuff changes overnight. Can we effectively use technology in instruction and assessment? Right? Do you even know how to integrate the technology into your instruction? Can you use a PowerPoint? Can you use video systems to videotape students participating, whether it's working on form of their swing and for a golf shot, right? Or can they self or peer assess? Can you show them what an expert performer does if you want to take an example of a Tiger Woods or a Phil Mickelson, right? Can you use that in assessment? Can you videotape your class in a gameplay situation and then go through and use your checklist or rubric to effectively assess your students? Can you even use your grading system, your online system? Does your school district use Canvas or Blackboard or PowerSchool or one of those other systems? Can you actually use that system for instruction as well as assessment, and not just recording assessments, but actually using it for assessments? If not, make sure you sign yourself up and get some professional development and training, or work with somebody that's good at it. Teachers are great at sharing. Teachers will teach other teachers. Don't be afraid to ask. Next, how does using technology affect our physical activity patterns? Well, if we just want to talk about computers and screen times, there was a report that came out that said elementary, middle school, and high school students spend 7 hours a day on some kind of screen time, whether that's a computer, whether it's their phone, whether it's watching TV or playing video games. That's 7 hours a day. So if you think of 7 hours a day, plus the 8 hours a day they should spend sleeping, most kids don't get enough sleep, plus the 8 hours a day they're in school, that's 23 hours a day. If you add 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for school, considering your transportation, and 7 hours of screen time. That only leaves 1 hour for any other activity. So hopefully we can move that physical activity needle above 1 hour. We have the Play 60 campaign, but if a student doesn't have PE in their curriculum where they get any play during the day, or they don't have a recess because it rained outside and they're inside playing a board game, where do we fit enough physical activity into their life? Does technology affect it in our physical education classroom? We want to integrate technology, but we don't want to overuse it to the point that our kids aren't being active in the different activities and actually having a chance to learn. All right? So make sure we don't spend more time in class with the technology than on the activity. Use the technology to enhance the different activities we do in the classroom. All right, so there are a variety of different ways you can use technology. There are systems you've learned in some of these classes. You might use a video presentation. You might use a video analysis. You might use a system such as Plickers where you can ask questions really quick and scan the room with your phone. Right? You might learn how to use a smartboard, a projector. All right, so look at a variety of different things and make sure you're able to have the technological literacy to effectively integrate technology into your classrooms, focused on instruction and assessment, not just the use of technology. All right, next let's look at implications for instruction. Remember, as physical educators, we must teach people the process of learning. How do you actually learn? We don't just teach doing. We demonstrate the activity, we model it, we give students a chance for independent guided practice, and then independent practice, and then a chance to get some coaching where we watch and observe and critique their actions. But they also then have to be able to self-critique their actions as they gain experience and knowledge. So we must teach students the process of learning. It's not just, oh, give me the ball and let me do it. All right? A lot of students want to do that, but we actually have to systematically teach them how to learn the correct way to do things over time. So how do we do this? We need to remember students, especially in a physical setting, learn experientially. They have to learn by doing. So yes, we're going to demonstrate. We're going to possibly break down an important part or two, and then we're going to give them some activities to learn the form of an activity to start out with, and then start doing that where they can see the action of it. Right? But it has to be systematically planned. That's why our sequence is so important, right? And then as students do it, we cannot forget to make sure we're giving that feedback. We are doing our teacher observation, providing feedback based on improvement. Too many teachers, especially in the calisthenics version of either their athletic warm-up or their PE class warm-up or an activity-based program warm-up, they go through the motions of having the students do the warm-up and they count, but you never see them walk around and explain to a student that they're not stretching far enough, that they don't have their hands in the right version, that if they don't have their leg straight, that they're not actually stretching the hamstring. All right, so you actually need to provide feedback. That's where learning comes from. All right, when we consider our sequence, we need to align the content and instruction and assessments. So we need to make sure we have the right test for the right activity, all right, and that we've actually taught it. And so we've taught it so students can be successful at the test. So you have to look at how these all go together, and we understand there's an important connection to that. We don't want to test something that we actually didn't teach. If it was critical if we're going to give people points in a volleyball play on how many times they score, all right, is that really the right way to go? Well, if we taught all the different skills such as serving and bumping to a partner and volleying and spiking, not every student's going to be able to spike. So we have to make sure our assessment is aligned with our instruction. If we taught serve, we need to make sure we assess our serve. If we're going to assess sportsmanship and character, we need to make sure we taught it in our programs. And then we're totally aligned, right? This requires a holistic view of our standards. We need to look at the standards very broad, and the NASP standards are broad. They're 5 foundational standards. But we need to remember that we don't just focus on one standard in a lesson. We might have an overarching focus, but we're going to bring other standards into it and teach a variety of things in one lesson. So Penny and Chandler in 2000, this is a good quote from the textbook, they contend that while often neglected, teaching is the most important aspect of the curriculum process. So they're saying that you can spend a lot of time on building an effective curriculum, but if you don't have teachers that understand how students learn and are effective teachers that provide feedback, can critique students and motivate them and keep them on task and continue to improve, teaching is more important than actually building the curriculum. So we cannot forget the teaching process and the importance of learning. So next, you've heard this several times, but let's get a review on backward design, especially as we talk about curriculum. All right, Wiggins and McTeague are the expert on this. They've wrote several books and articles and things like that. But here's a quote from Wiggins and McTeague in 1998. An outcomes approach of designing curriculum that suggests we design curriculum from the exit goals back to the starting point. So that's basically their definition of backward design. You're going to look at the end goal, where you want students to be. Are those our show me standards? Are those our NASP standards? Are those our grade level expectations? Are they a combination of all 3 of those? So we want to look at our exit goals for the course, break it down to the unit, break it down to the chapter, break it down to the lesson. We want to look at the exit goals and then work our way back to the starting point. So we always talk in backward design of, if you're driving across America and you're going from New York to California, you know you want to go to California first. Then you're going to divide up your trip along the way. All right, so you have to have your end goal in mind before you determine, do we have to drive straight through, or can we stop in different cities and see different sites? Do we have time to have a sit-down meal, or do we have to pack a lunch and eat out of the cooler in the car? All right, so here are 3 important questions that guide the backward design process as it relates to curriculum development. First, what should participants know and be able to do as a result of participating in our program? So that would probably be related to our grade level expectations if we're going to look at developing this by grade level. If we're looking program-wide, that might be the overall NASP standards, or in Missouri, you might relate this to the Show Me standards, especially in your high school curriculum. Number 2, How will we know if they have been successful? Right? What evidence will show success? What level of understanding or performance means success? So we will have to set some kind of expected level of performance. So even when we're building our lesson, remember the task, condition, and criteria, right? That's the criteria, right? So when we assess, we need to have assessments, we need to have data, and we need to have a challenging level to make sure students can get there and learn along the way. How can we get them there in a challenging, engaging way? That's number 3. So that is aligning the goals of your instruction with your assessment. How can we teach them? How can we challenge them? How can we make it motivating yet challenging? The appropriate level of challenge is critical. So we must provide engaging lessons that are challenging and motivate students to learn. So if you go back through the question, number 1, what are the goods of our program? Remember, we did that activity. What are the goods of physical education? How are we going to assess it? What data are we going to get? And then what kind of lessons, number 3, and engaging activities are we going to do to challenge them to learn along the way, to stretch themselves to be successful in this assessment, to reach back to be successful at learning the goods or important things in physical education. So let's look at a quick visual here on backward design. We look at our curriculum, all right, and this is the overall curriculum development process, and we want to identify our desired results. Where do we want to go? All right, what are the grade level expectations? What are the standards? Next, we'll determine how we're going to test it. What's the acceptable level of performance to be proficient that might be stated in a GLE? And then what assessment are we going to use to ensure that students reach that level of performance? All right, so we'll design our assessment. So we know what we want, we know what we're going to do to test, how we get there, and then next, how do we get them from their baseline performance to meet the desired goals of the curriculum? What learning experiences do we need? This is actually where we do our lesson planning. We design learning experiences, we put our instruction together, and then we make sure that it leads to success in the assessment, and that the assessment comes back and assesses what we designed or we identified as the actual learning target. So the process will start all over. Curriculum, assessment, instruction, all the way back to the top, and it's backward design. This was designed by Wiggins and McTeague and also associated with some of Lambert's research. So let's put this all together now. All right, so think of our whole chapter 4. We're going to pull it all together and even look back to chapter 3, which is designing quality physical education curriculum. So when we pull everything together, first look at what worthwhile and meaningful learning goals will help our students meet the standards. So you're going to look at your main goals. You're going to determine, are we going to use grade level expectations? Are we going to use the Show Me standards? Are we going to use the NASP standards? Or are we going to use a combination of both? Actually, the grade level expectations are tied directly in to the NASP standards. So which ones of those are we going to pull out to use in our program? You're not going to be able, if we remember covering the curriculum, we're not going to be able to get all of them in there. We're going to have to select some out to make sure we give our students a broad learning experience. Number 2, how much time will it require to teach all these goals at the respective grade levels? So it's important for us to go back and look at our time on PE that we learned earlier in this lecture, figure out how much time we're going to have, and then divide out how many days we have, how many lessons we could actually teach, and then how we're going to move from one grade level to the next in some kind of grade level sequence. All right. Then number 3, how can students demonstrate success, mastery, or achievement of the learning goals and ultimately the standards? Do we have some integrated assessments along the way? Are we allowing students some chance to continue towards mastery Once they master an activity, can they move on to the next? Or if they don't master it, do they need to stay on and keep working on it? How are we going to work our assessment into the program, making sure that we're documenting it and actually using it to continue to develop our future learning experiences? So what assessment evidence will be acceptable? Right? Do we need to have checklists showing students have mature form or pattern in different activities? Do we need to have videotapes? Right? Or do we just give everybody a grade for dressing out and participating? That would probably be that example. The last example wouldn't be a great way to go about assessing anybody. So what assessment evidence will be acceptable? Right? So you need to remember, you're not only building assessments, it can't all be on direct observation unless you're going to take detailed observation notes at the end of each class period. All right. So what assessment evidence will be acceptable to show that we met our goals and our standards? Number 5, what is the most effective way to facilitate students meeting these goals and standards? So this goes on, how do we build our engaging, challenging learning experiences that actually teach the students what we plan to teach them? All right. So we have to look at how do we break down the skill, teach the skill starting with the form, giving students ample time to have some practice, to have guided practice as well as practice with the coach observing or a peer observation. What is the most effective way to facilitate these students getting to the goal? All right. And number 6, how can learning be achieved in an interactive and holistic way, and remembering to teach your students the process of learning as they go? We need to not only teach them the activity, we need to teach them how to learn the activity. So remember, that's a little bit different. We don't just come out, roll out the ball, say play, show them a video, say mimic that. We need to teach them how to learn and how to self-critique. Because remember, once we graduate from high school, unless we play college sports or we go to college, after we get through there, very few people have a life coach or a coach or somebody, a mentor that's with them every day to remind them how to do things. We need to teach people how to set their own goals, how to assess their own goals, how to learn both visually, reading, kinesthetically, auditory. So we need to teach them how to learn, even if it's learning about themselves and their own performance so they can improve over time. So here's our Chapter 4 summary. We just pulled it all together, but as we move through the process of curriculum development, our decisions are influenced by a variety of things. First of all, remember, factors related to our beliefs and values about physical education come into our own individual philosophy as we build the curriculum. So we need to remember not only it's what we value, but it's what our community values, and we need to consider the needs of our learners, which is next. How do we make our curriculum student-centered? We might build a curriculum guide, but our students may have already be above that level of achievement, so we can slide on to more challenging areas. We remember we need to adapt some things sometimes too, so we're going to have to look at our baseline of performance. If our students aren't there, how can we go reteach? So we need to have student-centered focus on our curriculum. Even if we build a curriculum guide, we might not be able to use that guide for every class or every learner or every year. We might have to adapt it. Next, the opinions and perceptions of the community are critical. What do we have in our community? If it's important, because we live in a rural area, that students need to understand how to work in the outdoors, handle a gun, handle a bow and arrow, how to handle a fishing pole, how to have hunters and boater safety, that's critical to have in our curriculum, right? If we're in an area where we have a large community-based swimming pool, well, swimming, life-saving, the ability to even not drown, do some CPR, some water safety in the pool is going to be critical too. But you also have to look at your community values. If your community values at the high school level are on team sports, there probably is going to have to be a little bit of an emphasis on team sports. If your community values are about safety and about performance and health, you're going to need to make sure you really put that into your curriculum. The other thing you're going to have to remember, when you're teaching health or some kind of health-related fitness, there's going to be some subjects, some subject areas or ways that you teach that are going to be important to have the backing of your community. Say, for example, if you're teaching human sexuality in your health class, there's going to be a lot of topics that you might need to make sure the board approves that curriculum because you're going to have a lot of different varying opinions in the community. And then next, we got to look at our contextual issues. This relates to our time on PE. If we're an elementary PE teacher, do we see our kids once a week? Do we see them every third day, every other day, every day? We see them every day for a semester and not again until the next year. How's it going to work? All right. As a high school PE teacher, is it every day? Is it you only have to take PE once? You take a health and fitness class second, and then you might take an elective physical activity course, and then you're done. So you might only have 1.5 credits of PE. So how are we going to relate this to time? Are we on a 30-minute block? Are we on an hour block? Are we on a block schedule where we meet for about 90 minutes? What do our facilities look like? Do we have a pool? Do we have a gym? Is our gym also the cafeteria? Is our gym carpeted, tiled, or wood? Is our gym big enough to split up a variety of classes? Do we have a weight room? Do we have access to an outdoor field? How far away is that outdoor field? Do we have tennis courts? So look at your different facilities, and that can help you determine where you're going to go. And then you need to also look with facilities, consider equipment, right? It's critical to understand what equipment you have to be able to design lessons. If you don't have equipment, don't have the budget, and can't get access to a new thing, think creatively outside the box. Can we borrow it? Can we rent it? Can we make it? And if not, that might be an activity you're going to have to put on pause until you can. And then look at your different scheduling issues. All right? Do you have students scheduled in a class that are a wide variety? All right, if you're at the high school level, are you going to have some very challenged emotional students in with your high-end athletes that might not get along in a class? How are we going to design our learning activities to meet both of them? You might look at the first thing in the morning. Are students even awake yet to get going? You might look at the first period after lunch when students tend to get sleepy, or can you go run a mile 30 minutes after lunch? Maybe not, because students might get sick. So you have to look at a variety of issues for scheduling, and this might be something you need to work with a counselor with, especially at the high school level, how you're going to systematically schedule your classes. So if we remember at the beginning of the chapter, we discussed some various learning outcomes or outcomes we'd like to have as a student. Here are a few of them that I'd like to ask you. So ask yourself, can I explain the considerations and steps necessary in building a cohesive PE curriculum? So you might want to start brainstorming now. This would be a good journal activity or assignment. Can you actually do that? If you can, then you met the Chapter 4 learning outcome. How would I know if you met it? I would have to assess you on it. I would have to build an assessment to determine if you could explain these things. Next, can I discuss how the following are linked to building curriculum? So there's 3 different areas. The different curricular considerations, the instructional alignment, which might be the instructional alignment triad, if we can go back to that learning from the last lecture, and backward design. All right, so how are these 3 things linked to building the curriculum? If you can answer that question correctly, then you would have met your learning target or learning outcome for Chapter 4. So how do I know if you've done this? Well, here's a way that I can find out. We are going to complete a chapter review type assignment, and the assignment is understanding curricular considerations. So the questions I just asked you, we're going to ask so I can assess them. Number 1, list the considerations and steps that are necessary for building a cohesive PE curriculum. And then number 2, I want you to define and explain how each one of these is linked to quality PE. So under 2, you'll have an A, B, and C. This should take multiple sentences, probably closer to a paragraph, to explain each one of these. All right, so you're going to post this. This is an assignment on Canvas, and it will be the way that I can assess to see if you've met your learning objectives or learning outcomes. So next, How do we want to figure out if you've met your learning objectives for the entire Unit 1? So we're going to have our Unit 1 exam. That's also due here in this module, in Module 4. So the questions, what's on this exam? Anything in the introduction materials or lectures or stuff outside of the chapters that we've covered during Unit 1. Then we'll have Chapter 1, 3, and 4, and that includes the lecture material as well as the textbook reading. So Unit 1 exam is going to cover the introduction, anything we've covered recently in lectures, Chapters 1, 3, and 4, as well as the section on GLEs and Show Me standards. So anything in the classroom lectures, videos, and or readings is fair game for the exam. What is the exam format? There are 50 multiple choice and true-false questions. I don't do essays or short answers on the exam because we do those throughout our units. It is open book and open notes, but it is not phone a friend. It's an individual assessment. And you're going to have a 100-minute time limit. So you get 2 minutes per question. Can you look up every question? No, you won't have time. So my suggestion to you is to make sure you study your notes and make sure you've read the book before you take the exam, and then do the best you can. And if you have 8 or 9 questions you have to look up, you'll have plenty of time to go back and look them up if you took effective notes. All right, so a couple things before I answer the last question, when do I take the test? With any online type of test, we have to put in safeguards. So the time limit's a safeguard. When you answer a question, you're locked and you can't go back and change it. All of the test questions are randomized between students, so you can't sit next to a buddy and take the test. And then all of the answers are also shuffled. So question 1 for me is going to be different than question 2 for somebody else, or 1 for somebody else. And then our A's are going to be different as well. So we have to have some kind of accountability in the test. So there are a variety of safeguards. You can read over those in the test instructions too. When do you take the test? The test opens Thursday, October 1 at 8 a.m. and it is due by Sunday, October 4th at 8 p.m. So make sure you take the test by the deadline, because if I have to go back and open it up, there's going to be a severe penalty. Make sure you have good internet access. You are free of distractions, because once you start it, you can't stop it and start over. And if you get kicked off your internet, then you're going to lose the test and we're going to have to completely start over. So make sure you're somewhere with a good internet connection, and usually these tests don't work very well on your phone, so make sure you get on a laptop or more of a device. So here's your to-do list. All right, you have an assignment, Understanding Curricular Considerations. That's kind of a chapter review type assignment. It's on Canvas. Submit that by the deadline. And then our Unit 1 exam covering all the intro material, any of the Module 1 through 4 information, as well as Chapters 1, 3, and 4 from the textbook. Good luck on the test. If you have any questions on anything from this lecture, feel free to email me, be as specific as you can, or you can also email me and we can set up a video conference if need be. We will be in class again next time, so make sure you start looking into some of the main theme curriculum models. You might want to skim on one of the first. So you might want to start maybe skimming and looking at Chapter 8 on Monday before we come back to our next class on personal and social responsibility, main theme curriculum model. We'll get started on Unit 2 when we get back. Have a great day. Once again, good luck on the exam, and we will see you soon.